remember that guy from Conservative Home who we watched on stream who was arguing that it was good to take away the winter fuel payment from all but those on pension credit, and in the process argued that we should get rid of the state pension entirely, and that on top of that we should force old ladies who can't afford to heat their flat to move into HMOs. That guy, that sociopath that we watched, Jim from Friday Night Dinner, he's back. He's been back on Talk TV talking to James Whale, friend of the show, and apparently things get a little bit heated. Spoiler alert, it's James Whale, so it should be very funny. Let's have a watch.
A columnist for I nearly said a communist. A columnist for Conservative Home. Charles, welcome to the programme. I don't think you're going to be a really popular person because apparently you believe Labour scrapping the winter fuel allowance has been the best thing they've ever done.
Absolutely. I don't think that people need the winter fuel allowance. The vast majority of pensioners can afford to do without it. If you look at the bottom quintile of household expenditure of individuals aged from 65 and over, they spend 17.8% of their income on hotels, restaurants, recreation, cigarettes and alcohol. That equates to £2,100.
His phone.
Without the winter fuel allowance, all they would have to do is cut their leisure expenditure by 10%.
But that's not everybody. That's not everybody amongst that quintile. You're trying to take out a bunch of averages and think that that applies to literally everybody in the bottom quintile. There are plenty of people who don't get pension credit who do need the winter fuel allowance. And who don't spend all their money on hotels and booze or whatever. Is this a real person, 27 Club? Yes. This is a real person with real opinions. He got kicked out of the KCL Conservative Club for being too right-wing. And this guy, he loves Labour policy. This guy has been a cheerleader for the Labour Party now. Just shows you what Keir Starmer is like.
Why should they? Why should I? I'm a pensioner, right? I'm in my mid-70s, and I'm probably not now eligible for the winter fuel allowance. But I've paid enormous amounts of tax my entire life, been very lucky. Why shouldn't I benefit from a bit of this when I get old? I can't earn.
Well, you're benefiting from your taxes. You're benefiting from my taxes. And it's fine for you to do that. It's fine for you to benefit from my taxes. You do not pay tax. I guess you do on your Talk TV earnings, but you don't contribute into a pot again that gets paid back out to you. You get paid by current taxpayers. And that's always been the case.
Earn as much now as I could when I was your age, and we've supported this country. We've done quite a lot for this country, and now the sodding members of Parliament, both sides, giving it all away. They give it away in overseas aid, 10 billion a year.
The
or
unions,
something.
£9 billion to the unions, taken off.
No, they didn't go to the unions. They went in pay awards to people who actually do keep the country functioning. I'm sure James Whale really did pay his way into the country by being a talk radio host. Yeah, the most important of sectors of the economy, talk radio hosts are absolutely invaluable to the running of the economy, being a talk radio host, as opposed to driving the trains that keep the economy going or keeping people healthy like doctors and nurses. It wasn't the unions that got their money, it was working people who do real jobs, who aren't, may I reiterate, talk radio hosts.
For the pensioners. But the other thing, in the office, I had a look at the figures, and there's 3/3 in the year where they measure how many deaths there are, and there's 30,000 excess deaths in the winter period because of the cold and respiratory. So obviously they haven't got excess money because they're dying. So it's not like they're spending excess. They're 30,000, and there'll be more now, won't there?
Let Charles answer this.
So it sort of proves your point wrong.
Charles.
I'm very sympathetic to the idea. In fact, I agree with the idea that if you pay £1 into the state, you should get that pound out. But the average boomer...
No, that's not how that works at all. People don't pay in based upon what they get out. They pay in based upon their ability to pay. Even under a household budget model, that's not how that works. Millionaires who pay in more than people on minimum wage are not supposed to get more out of the state than those who are poor. It's a way of income redistribution.
Those born from 19...
I find that insulting, by the way.
Okay, well, the average person...
It's because he is one.
The average person...
Gammon. We prefer gammon.
I find that insulting.
The average person born between 1946 and 1961...
They've taken it all.
...have taken out £1.20 from the welfare state for every £1 they've paid in. So when you make the argument that I've paid in all my life, so I'm entitled to get all of the money out and the winter fuel allowance, it doesn't go through. Because
what about the 30,000 excess deaths, though? Let's talk about the actual proper poor people.
Okay, but it's important to distinguish two arguments.
Yeah, I agree.
One is, I've paid in all my life, so I should get it out, and that doesn't apply to the winter fuel allowance, because most people haven't paid enough in to warrant it. Now, you're talking about need.
Just, again, if we just stop this I've paid in so I deserve things. No, we spend money based on utility. We make government policy based upon utility. None of this I paid £1 and I take £1 out nonsense. That's not how macroeconomics works. It's not how statecraft is supposed to work. It's not how policy is supposed to work. We write policy, we engage in policy because it has the best utilitarian outcomes. Older people need to have warmer homes because they are frailer than younger people. Therefore, we pay them winter fuel allowance. That is the utility. That's why we do the policy. Not because they've paid in or they've already taken too much out by getting a good welfare state from 45 to 1990 or whatever. Nonsense. Abject nonsense. That's not how it's supposed to work.
Now, as I've said, the bottom quintile of pensioners spend 17.8% of their income on alcohol, cigarettes, hotels, recreation,
and why shouldn't they?
Restaurants. Well, I've just told you why they shouldn't, because they.
Why, when you get old, should you not have a nice life?
Because they've taken more out of the welfare state than they've paid in.
You've taken too much.
Not our fault, Charles.
Well, it is, because people such as yourself.
And again, I'm just going to point out the hypocrisy here, is that these people here saying, oh, well, I've paid in and I've got loads out of the welfare state, but we need to take welfare payments away from the scroungers and the disabled. That was good austerity, but it's bad austerity when you take it away from me personally, because these people are devoid of compassion. These people are devoid of thinking outside of their own material interests and think about, other people, which basically at this point seems to be the divider between the left and right, just caring about other people or not. There's a really funny HuffPost article from 10 years ago at this point. It was just titled, I don't know how to convince you that you should care about other people. It does a lot of my thinking. It really does a lot of my thinking even to this day. Even if you were to accept his framing, and you shouldn't, if you don't provide benefits, then it ends up costing the state much more in terms of social problems, be that healthcare or prisons. Exactly! If you don't spend money alleviating societal ills through public state policy, you then paying more down the line are all of the negative externalities, such as having to pay for the healthcare of cold pensioners. Very good point.
Or others have voted.
Pay tax.
You pay tax, but you haven't paid in enough tax to warrant getting the winter fuel allowance.
Not my fault.
Out.
People like you.
I can't speak about you in particular because I don't know how wealthy you are and whether or not you've paid in on a net basis.
I'm not particularly wealthy.
But literally, they're trying to argue from the standpoint that you should get as much as you pay in out. The end point of this rhetoric is that millionaires and billionaires and multi-billionaires should get more out of the state than poor people, which is insane logic. Absolutely catastrophically insane logic.
But I've earned a reasonable amount of money for the last 50 years.
Well, if you're in the top 25% of earners, then you probably are a net contributor and you probably do deserve the winter fuel allowance.
Thank you.
But
he's out here saying that rich people deserve the winter fuel payment and poor people don't. He's unironically making the argument that poor people deserve it less than rich people. He's even more insane than I thought. He could be a Chris Morris character, absolutely. Really kind of showing a mirror up to conservatives what they really sound like to everybody else outside of their tiny little bubble. So we should means test it then, but better? No, we should provide it to everybody and then have a tax taper at the top to recoup that money back from rich people, because as the lowest in administrative costs and means that nobody falls through the cracks. It's the easiest and simplest way to do it.
I want
poorer
it back.
pensioners.
It's the middle ones that shouldn't get it. The middle ones.
What?
The very poor ones should, and him that's
But
paid.
why should the very poor one get it?
Because they're dying. 30,000 of them died. Yeah, but you don't want them to die, do you?
The 30,000 individuals there that have died, I suspect, have died because they've decided not to put up the heating when they could afford to put up the heating.
Charles,
but they want.
We've now moved on to those old people killed themselves by being stupid. That's how far we've gone here. We're through the looking glass here, people.
To save money.
You really shouldn't have anything to do with the Conservative home. You're never going to get Conservatives elected.
I mean, this is just conservatism. This is what Conservatives believe.
Again, if you go down this road.
I don't think they will.
But
anyway.
Why on earth would you feel like that when there are people who are living, I don't know how much you earn, but there are people scraping by and trying to live on £800 or £900 a month and less. Now, it's not a lot of money to be able to live on. If you don't have a private pension, and I don't, well, actually, I think I do. I think it pays something like 25 quid a week. I didn't pay into it after I was about 35. But the fact is that these people have struggled through their lives. Most of them have worked. Those people who didn't work, who are chronically disabled, that's a completely different issue. There are people who worked, scrimped and saved. They get to the end of their lives, they go on the state pension, and it is almost impossible.
Miserable existence, and they've worked all their lives.
Succeed.
Yeah.
That's not true. The state pension gives individuals about £11,000 a year. Now,
Could you live on 11,000?
Exactly. Could you live on £11,000 a year? It's not a good state pension. It isn't a good state pension. Especially, again, if you're a renter. I made this point yesterday. I'll make it again today. If you're a renter, rather than somebody who's managed to get on the property ladder because you are unluckier or you're poorer, you need more money than the state pension provides. How could anybody live on £11,000 a year unless they have literally zero housing costs?
Could I live on £11,000 a year? Yes, I could live on £11,000.
Where do you live? Where do you live? In Thailand or something?
I live in Begbroke, and I pay £550 a month for my room and my bills included. And
You
my
don't
food
have
bill,
£450
my
left, then?
food bill
Yeah.
would come to about £1,500. I could live on £11,000.
It wouldn't leave
a
you
year.
with much,
It
would it?
wouldn't be nice. I'm not pretending it
But
would be
why
nice.
shouldn't they have a decent, be warm and have just a decent, slightly
Old age.
nice old
At
age?
the moment, they can. As I've said, the bottom quintile of pensioners spend 17.8% of their income on hotels, restaurants, alcohol, cigarettes,
Good.
and recreation.
He's going to go on the shared house thing again, isn't he? Yeah, he's going to say, get the old people out of their flats, get rid of their independence and all their dignity. Go live in an HMO with some students if he can't afford the bills.
That's fine, but they can't claim when the winter fuel allowance is cut that somehow they need it. Because they
That's a
can
good
cut
point,
back
yeah.
their
Those-
expenditure
those sort
on
of
these
people-
unnecessary items.
I don't believe the sort of people you describe actually worry about it at all. I think the people who you are talking about, those people who are just about managing hand to fist or whatever,
Hand to mouth.
yeah, that's a better
Hand
way.
in fist.
They are the people who are in need. They are the people who, in many cases, are too embarrassed to say that they
Yeah.
don't have enough money. And okay, they can go, and if they're clever enough, but you have to be clever. Go and they can apply for all other kind of benefits. But it's not an easy thing to do, and it's not guaranteed. So what the government who passed this, I can't remember who did pass the winter fuel benefits.
Tony
Labour
Blair,
Party,
wasn't it? Tony Blair.
1997.
No, and and the point that Tony Blair made, he didn't do many good things, but one thing he did is he said, "Well, give it to every pension, everybody who draws a pension, and that way we won't have to spend so much money on administration, and people who have, still are paying tax, then they'll be paying tax anyway."
I can't believe I'm agreeing with James Whale. This is how mad Charles Amos is as an individual. He is making me agree with James Whale. I hate him even more now for making me agree with James Whale, because he's right. And getting rid of the administrative costs is good. I think that if you think that the government's finances aren't good enough to justify it being universal anymore, introduce a tax taper. Say that again. But it'll be interesting to see if James Whale has this same approach when it comes to the disabled or the poor or the unemployed.
It's important to mention that the very, very poorest individuals that you speak about, the 1 million pensioners who still receive pension credit, will continue to receive the winter fuel allowance. So if you're just concerned about need warranting people getting the winter fuel allowance, those who genuinely do need the winter fuel allowance will still receive
Would
it.
you take the bus passes off people?
I would
as well?
take the bus passes off people.
Oh,
I
Mr.
can't stand
mean.
seeing buses just full of pensioners all literally
They're
taking a
keeping
free
warm
ride.
on it, if anything.
I cannot think of anything else that would explain this guy's behaviour other than the fact that he's just a legitimate sociopath. I don't know that, of course. I'm not saying that there's going to be a diagnosis somewhere, but I'm just intuiting this from everything that I've seen. The only way that you can end up being like this person is if you're an actual sociopath. Anyone else got any better ideas? Unless, again, it's an elaborate bit that's lasted for years and years and he does in his personal life as well. He literally just said he couldn't stand buses full of pensioners riding around for free. The people who are so old they cannot drive. This is why we have subsidy for it. They are too old to be able to drive because it would be unsafe. So we subsidise the fact that they have no choice other than to get the bus.
I'm literally a communist.
Again, I think that we should make public transport free at the point of use as a way of encouraging the taking up of usage of public transport and get people out of their cars. But at the very least, we understand that the limited mobility of older people means that they are less likely to be able to have the functions to be able to drive. So we subsidise the ability for them to have transport elsewhere, given that their choices have been made for them already due to their lack of ability. That's the whole point of the free bus pass. But again, in the libertarian's mind, if you're too old to be able to drive, that's your fault. Stop being poor and old. May not have been your choice, but tough In the libertarian's mind, everybody has the same spawn point, everybody has the same circumstances, everything is fair as long as you do it like a physicist would imagine it, as a frictionless sphere in a vacuum, rather than existing in a certain material reality. They could also beat the energy companies into an OAP tariff rather than giving them cash to blow on their overpriced heating bill. I mean, that is also true. We could just have more of a punitive policy to the energy companies, but I think we should be able to do both, quite frankly.
They can keep warm on it. It gives them independence, keeps them alive, company gets them out and about.
It does do that, I agree.
What the flipping heck's wrong with you that you don't like old people?
Miserable.
I don't dislike old people.
Obviously you do. How old are you? 30-something?
No, I'm 24.
You're 24.
I'm 24. Now, what I dislike...
I still can't get over that he's 24. I still cannot get over that somebody of that age looks like this. I can't get over it. The man looks like he has quantum leapt here from 1970, from like a serial killer documentary.
20-frigging-4.
What I dislike, James,
you are disgusting.
is pensioners saying they are entitled to benefits on the basis they've paid in all of their lives when they've not paid in on a net analysis.
And you're quite straight-faced.
The average pensioner has not paid into the welfare state on a net analysis.
Are you hoping to be a politician at some point in the future?
I did in the past, but not anymore.
Really? Good, because people like you are the least people we need to have in Parliament.
He's just a conservative. That's your political ideology, James. He just says what you people say about other disadvantaged groups, except he at least has the courtesy to be outspoken about it. At least he has the courtesy to say what he really thinks, rather than to pretend you care like people like you, James. This is just conservatism. This is conservatism at its base level. At the very least, when it comes to James Whale and his friend, no matter how into conservative politics they are, no matter how far they get into conservative politics, they still fundamentally cling on, at least somewhat, to the idea of the social contract. They still somehow believe that the social contract has some good. You are an old person, therefore we should mitigate some of the worst parts about being old through the welfare state. They fundamentally believe that the social contract has some relevance. I wish they would apply that same logic to the rest of society, but it still shows that people like James Whale can be sold on implying the social contract elsewhere. People like Charles Amos, the social contract does not exist anymore. It's not relevant, it's not something he believes, he doesn't even take it into account when deciding his political opinions. And that is neoliberalism writ large, is the destruction of the social contract. And this just shows you basically why conservative politics and neoliberal politics has to die. It has to go away, it cannot be allowed back into power, it cannot be allowed back into public discourse, because it has absolutely brain-broken people, because this is where the logic of that will take you if you believe in it wholeheartedly. There are points where conservatives will kind of hit the barrier and say, no, that doesn't pass the vibe check anymore on what little I believe in the social contract that you have left. But if we continue along the line of the abandonment of the social contract, people like Charles Amos will be everywhere, and that's the problem. Hey there, if you enjoyed the video, make sure that you like and leave a comment. That helps the video out in the algorithm. If you subscribe and ring the bell, it'll let you know when I go live. I stream every day on YouTube and Twitch. You can also follow all of my socials down in the description. And if you want to support me in a more financial manner, there's a join button for membership to just 99p to be a member on YouTube, as well as a Patreon, and there's some merch there as well. And hopefully I'll catch you on the next video. Take care.